All right. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be all four of us today to celebrate the brand new release of SoundID Reference by Sonarworks. I'm joined by an extraordinary panel today made of Maria, Elisa, Ayerbe. Maria, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Loic?
Great. Eryck, Bry or Brie? I didn't even ask you. Bry. So, Eryck, how are you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you and great meeting you. And Warren Huart from LA. Warren, how are you?
Oh, I'm from LA now. I love that. Yes.
Well,
I suppose
I
am in LA. Yes.
You are in LA, but you're not from LA. Where are you from? Where in England?
I'm from a village called Crookham Village in Hampshire.
All right. So
the UK.
Everybody watching this right now, it's time to Google Map and see where Warren is from. Actually, while we're at it and try to get to, I'm sure a lot of our viewers know some of you or all of you. But what I really wanted to do here is we're going to talk about education and how education has changed from the traditional studio environment into the online world. And all of you, you've done an amazing amount of master classes. You have your own program. But really, what I wanted to do as an introduction is ask you to share a bit with us and our audience the process of how you got here as a professional engineer. What really was the path that you took? And was there a moment in your journey that had a significant impact on your career? And Maria, since you're wearing pink, red PJ, you go first.
Thank you, Loic. I love my PJ, by the way. It's amazing. It's so soft. So basically I started out my audio process when I joined college back in 2003. I joined a program in Universidad de Chile back in Santiago, Chile. It's an audio engineering program. I was there for about 2.5, 3 years. And then I decided that I wanted to actually have a degree in music itself. So I went back to my hometown, Bogota, Colombia, and I joined a music program in there. It's like a music conservatoire, but instead of going for an instrument, I actually majored in audio engineering as well. So it took me about 7.5 years to graduate from my undergraduate program. Then after that, I went to Middle Tennessee State University and I studied, I have an MFA in recording arts and technologies. And I went there for 3 years and, that's it. It's about 10 years of studying, but also in the meantime, I've had parallel to everything. I've had a career, both, as an audio engineer, professional in audio engineering, and also music producer, and also as an audio educator myself.
This, education process that you had a moment where like you learned something where like this is really for me or
well, I knew that I wanted to do audio engineering since the get-go. That's why I actually joined an audio engineering program right away. But I remember when I was the first time I was sitting in a board, just running the board myself, I felt like, whoa, I have the power. And all of these buttons are actually just the same thing. And I know how to use that one thing. And that was it.
And I remember you showed me that power last year or 2 years ago in Miami in front of an SSL. I
ran an SSL in front of a class. We did a drum course, right?
I remember.
Yeah, I used like all the faders in the room. Yeah, that was super fun. Yeah.
I know what every button means, Loic.
Yeah, literally.
Thank you so much. International background as well. I mean, Chile, Colombia, and of course the US.
Exactly.
Incredible. Warren, what about you?
I came up as a musician. So I was a guitar player, bass player, keyboard player, and drummer, but that in that order, meaning I'm a pretty averagely bad drummer. And I think it was out of necessity. Like most of us, I just got into 2 cassette players, then 4-track cassette player, then ADATs. You remember ADATs in the early 90s? And I remember, and I had a studio with some friends that had an MSR 24, which was a 24-track Tascam 1-inch machine. But it was always sort of out of necessity. I didn't have any formal education. However, if we can go on to that kind of thing, I still believe in formal educations as well. And I believe in any form of education, quite frankly, anything you can get. But it was always the annoying guy in the band. I was the annoying guy in the band, tapping the engineer or the producer on the shoulder going, why'd you do that? What's all that? And I just had to know. And also, I fell in love with music really young. My father was a painter, an artist, and the music was just in the house 24 hours a day. It was all classical and jazz, but it was just music. And so I grew up in a very kind of artistic household, and I fell in love with the music. I mean, 7, 8, 9, I was collecting albums, so it was never necessarily so much about being in the band. I got into a band because it was a way of getting into music, but I always joke, I fell in love with music sort of pre-puberty. It wasn't a case of like, yeah, I'm going to get in a band and get some girls, man. I was already like locked in my bedroom at like 11 years old, like checking the back of records, reading people's names and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, like all of us, I'm sure all 4 of us here, I was obsessed. There you go. That's pretty much all I should have said.
Obsessed. Thank you for sharing. And Eryck, what about you?
Well, I have a different journey. Coming up to like the, because like parents like, hey, you need proper education. This field is great, but my family is also like Warren is also musical minded. It's always singing. My dad plays the guitar, and I was always in bands too. But at the same time, I was going to school as a nursing, and my focus was more being in a band and trying to capture the sound. So like Warren, we bought a 4-track cassette recorder, tried to record the drums in the basement, and it never sounded as good as I wanted to hear, like how they have it in the radio. So I was like, there has to be something. So we booked a studio, and I think at that moment changed my whole perspective. I was like, all right, Mom, I don't want to do nursing anymore. And I didn't know at the time that audio was a feasible field. I didn't know there's a career behind it. I thought it was just like, okay, you book a studio, and if I get big being in a band, great. But I didn't know there was actually a field in audio. So when we decided to book a studio to record a band, I was more intrigued about how the guy was actually capturing the instruments than us playing. I was like, oh, how did you do that? Like, Warren, you're like, how did you do that? Why did you tweak that knob? Why? I was not saying. So I was soaked in, and since then I researched on how to get into that field, and I enrolled in school in 5 towns for a semester, and then I went to Berkeley for another semester, and then my parents were like, hey, you need to move back home. So I started freelancing in different studios in Long Island, and that's where I learned more of the engineering part of it, and that's where I fell in love. And yeah, obviously my parents weren't happy about dropping nursing school, but now they understand.
Thank you for sharing. I think my takeaway from this is, one, there's not one path. There's really multiple paths. But the common thread among all of us is this sense of passion that is very strong. And I think you need it in a way to fight the adversity. It's not always easy. And if you don't have this fire in you, you might abandon very quickly. So I see that it's very common among the 3 of you. And thank you so much for sharing your stories, because we're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about the information, but I think it's important to remind everybody how we got here today, at least the 3 of you. And really to switch to the topic of the day, which is, traditional learning environment in studios to online. I did a quick search on the topic and to see how much content is out there about audio engineering. And I searched for something very specific, which was how to mix vocals. And I found 33 million videos. YouTube, I think, returned 33 million videos. That's all. That's all. So my first question, and actually I'm gonna start with you, Warren. And of course, we might know why. For Warren, you are a produce like a pro on YouTube, and you will see why I'm asking him first. But can you learn audio engineering on YouTube? And where do we start with 33 million videos of how to mix vocals? Where do I start?
Wow, it's a wonderful question. Well, one of my most successful videos is called, I think it's called Mixing Vocals, or Mixing Vocals to Sit in a Mix, or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's like a 1 million viewed video, and it does really well. But what's interesting about it, just to sort of backward answer your point, is it's a way to mix vocals. It's not the way. And that's where I have really, what I've really come to learn over the last few years is that people are looking for a solution to a problem, realizing that this is a creative job. And the way I may demonstrate vocals, the way I mix vocals on that song might not work on the next song, certainly wouldn't work with a different artist. There are certain things, techniques that we can employ when it comes to mixing, but vocals in particular, seeing as you're talking about that, is one of the most, well, it's not one, it is the most idiosyncratic thing you can do. It is so unique from one human being to another, or else we'd all be singing into the same mic for the same compressor, same mic pre, same everything, and have the same thing. So can YouTube and online education help? Absolutely. I mean, as long as you understand that it's just giving you, one of the many 10 million different roadmaps to get from here to here. And I suppose your question is probably a bit more loaded than that. Like, probably what everybody's wanting to know the answer is, like, how do you cut through the crap, to be honest? And that is difficult. It is very difficult because there's a lot of the most successful videos I've watched tend to be the ones that what's the phrase? I can't remember the phrase, but they sort of like, they're popularist in quality. So what they'll do is they'll give you the quick, easy solution. Oh, that must be the way, and that will get the 10 million views. I have, without getting onto too much of a tangent, but the whole top-down mixing thing is something that's very popular to teach because it will get you a good result, because you put multiband compression on your master bus and mix into it, it will even things out. And it will give you a pretty good mix, but you'll never get a great mixing like that. You want to solve all of the problems. However, a video like that, for instance, will be 100 times more successful than a video that's giving you all of the real details. So it's a constant thing because, ultimately YouTube is an entertainment platform. Therefore, it features videos that are the most entertaining. And unfortunately, the most educational things can sometimes be a little boring, or at least not as clickbaity and exciting. So it's a difficult one, for the people watching. It's probably find somebody, that you identify with, that makes music that you like, that probably, look them up, go to AllMusic, go to one of those kind of discoggy things, see if you can find something they've done, at least to sort of like listen to what they've done, or anything. Just find a way of attaching yourself to that person, and then sort of learn as much as you can. But it is a bit of a minefield. I'd be lying if I didn't say it, because you've got an overly similar. This is such a big question. I should probably pass it on because I could literally talk an hour on this.
And we're going to come back to it. Don't worry. So keep your thoughts.
I want to make sure. I want to make sure. Yes.
Yeah. We're going to come back.
Make sure you click my videos.
Go and watch Maria. Go watch Maria's videos on vocals.
But, Eryck, I want actually to extend the conversation with you, and let's say, what should be the criteria to select the educational content on YouTube?
I mean, it has to be. It has to have a standard of quality, obviously, and it should have a factual content, not just like just Warren said. It's not how to achieve certain things, but what it's needed to be done to achieve it. You know what I mean? It should be. I think it should be diverse also in. It should be diverse in respect of levels of difficulty, because there's certain videos that it's so hard to do for beginners and vice versa. So I think that's very important, and it should be also it should also present variety of points, not just certain way of tweaking a snare or tweaking a drum. There's other ways to do it. I mean, those are the things I could think of. Of course, it should be something that can utilize thinking skills and decision-making skills too for the viewers, and that's important.
I mean, to continue just on that, but it's clearly to Warren's point, there was like, I want to say the cheap and dirty or fast, do, but you don't necessarily explain why you apply some settings or what you do. You don't really explain the why. And others where it's more like, okay,
that's the word, the why.
The why.
How, the why you do.
Yeah. And there are others are explaining more concept, all right, before I tell you what compressor and what settings I put, why I will use compression.
Not just how, but why.
Yeah, the why. So, and that's the type of content. So for all of you, would you say the information out there is reliable and mostly beneficial? It's more like a different jungle, and you need to know how to navigate through. And I think, Warren, you start touching on this, but I want everybody's input on this. It's a jungle.
What I'd say is that sometimes, and I always encourage people, because any information, good or bad, it's about you. It's like the fake news, right? It's like you have that content out, you have news and you have real news, and you can decide whether you click on one or the other. It's up to you to make that choice. But when it comes down to making aesthetic decisions, as Warren was saying, like, for example, there are instances like I mix a lot of reggaeton, and then there are instances where I'm like, I wonder how the hell they managed to do this. And then I just look in the most dodgiest place of all on YouTube, and then I find that there is a technique that engineers and what the reggaeton has become, and it has nothing to do with the academia, and it would blow everyone's mind on AS or whatever when it comes down to like being super technical about it, but it works. So then I watch that and I am outstanded by it, but I actually try it, and then I decide whether if I want to apply it or not. And then might as well one day, I've come to situations where I'm like literally mixing a string quartet and I need to do something, and I come up with this crazy weird parallel technique that I would only use for making reggaeton beats super snappy, and that turns out to give me what I need for a cello. It's up to the people to make their minds on the content that they look for in the end, I think.
Also, you have to look at the video if the video has engaged and satisfied similar viewers as you. So if you go watch a video and you have the same interest, and you would see the comments that viewers are positive, I mean, that's the perfect start.
So you read the comments. So while we're having this, people who watch this video, we need to encourage them to make a lot of comments, what they've learned during this presentation. So, YouTube's algorithm is going to push this video out, and more people will see it, and they will be educated on how to find good content online and not how to avoid the pitfall. That's what we need to do. So guys, listen to Eryck, make comments below, okay? No, but hey, listen, have you often or once seen people giving bad advice on YouTube or online mixing courses?
Oh, all the time.
All the time.
All the time, yeah. Yeah.
And this is the entertaining part of it. Or maybe not.
I watch, especially during the pandemic, that lots of people have gone into doing this, and some incredibly talented people, and it's been absolutely beautiful. And then lots of people have got into it and have really. You can watch them sort of learn how to do it. So they're showing a technique, and then maybe 3 months later they're mixing another song, and they're now completely doing it differently because they're actually learning. So I go to some channels, and I can tell, oh, this person's a year into mixing and they're already teaching. I mean, you can. Isn't that true? Can't you all say that? You see it all the time. I mean, some people with teaching that are selling things that they can't yet do themselves. I mean, that's just sort of an unfortunate thing. But it's YouTube. It's entertainment. It's a platform. It's the biggest videos on YouTube aren't anything to do with what we do. They're all to do with dances and I don't know, or whatever it might be, but not you know, we're a very small piece of it, and it's a wonderful resource to go and find information, and I absolutely value it. But you know, there's so much more to it, and they'll just come back and watch videos by that person, and that's also a big part of, you know, of it's a community thing, and that's okay as well. It's very difficult because I certainly don't want to feel like I'm passing in judgment, but I am answering your question directly. Is there bad stuff up there? Yes, there is.
Yeah. Maria, what are the most common mistakes you see from people learning from YouTube videos?
I'd say that's a great question. I'd say first, there's one really common mistake that I've seen, and also because while I teach, obviously I encourage my students to go on and look for other sources, because especially when I remember when I was a student, well, it was a different world, right? It wasn't YouTube was started while I was halfway through my career, my degree, so it wasn't the same. And we only had access to the amount of knowledge that my professors had, and the amount of things that I could do while I was in school, and that was it. Nowadays is completely different, and I do encourage my students to do that. But then they come in the next day and they're like, "So I spent $1,000 on plugins," and I'm like, "No, that was not the point." I mean, you're talking about techniques. You're not talking about a specific plugins. Yes, they are plugins that will do specific things, obviously. But when you're learning compression, it doesn't matter which compression you get. I mean, if you can, and I always tell my students, start, if you're using Pro Tools, start with the plugins that come with Pro Tools. And I bet you, if you learn really good how to use those, then you can move on and purchase your next kit. And then you'll understand the basics and so forth. Same with Logic or Ableton. Those are great starting points. And so that is one thing. You don't need to purchase everything that you see on the videos just because they're there. And then the other thing, as Eryck and Warren were saying, is that just because you saw something that worked on a video on YouTube, it doesn't mean that it will work for you. And it doesn't mean that it will work for every situation in every instance. So there's not a magic formula. There's not a magic trick. And I'd say that is something that for somebody who wants instant gratification, obviously it's impossible to handle and it's impossible to deal with. But then again, managing frustration is, I believe, the number one skill that you need to have in order to become an audio engineer.
Amen to that.
Managing frustration. So that's when people get to this part of the video, I want to make sure you drop the comment what kind of frustration you usually experience when you try to mix or learn, because I will personally look at comments and see what we inspire. So let's flip the coin here a bit. And are they instructors or YouTube celebrities, creators, whatever we want to call it, or other channels you'd like to check out and will recommend to our audience?
Where's Warren?
Warren, where's he at? Right here.
Very points at Warren. Right, so.
As you're watching Warren, go ahead and watch my video.
Yeah, Maria has videos with us, so go.
Tell Warren. I mean, I admit, like, I would go check out Warren's videos. It's like, how did Warren do that? And I would still I would still use it. I mean, Huart is one of them, and usually a lot of companies like plugin companies and gear companies usually have their own video of how to use it and how to use that specific plugin on the vocals, on a snare. I mean, those are more reliable sources. I usually go straight to those companies instead of searching for other videos. And obviously, Produce Like a Pro is like one of the perfect example. But yeah, plugin companies usually give like great tools and show you videos on how to use it.
We try to as much as I can give out, if I'm doing something like I'll do a recording with one mic and I'll review it, and then I might do a quick mix of it, and then I'll give out the multi-tracks, because then what somebody can do is like copy what I'm doing. Sometimes they make it better, you know. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult otherwise if somebody's like giving you, you know, I watch some of these like really expensive, you know, production videos and stuff like that. You know, I always joke about it with the camera like panning across the console slowly with like really crazy depth of field while somebody's going, I took the 10K and I just, it's like a little, like a little bit air, And I'm like, no, I don't. It's not going to help anybody. It's really difficult because I know that there's a place for that, because part of a learning experience is like Maria was saying, and me too. First time you sit on a console, you're like, oh, I've made it. I'm in front of a Neve. I'm in front of an SSL. It's a wonderful experience. And a part of the huge lure of why we got into music was to be involved, be behind the console, pick up the Les Paul, whatever it might be, whatever inspired us. So I do understand that. So there is definitely a place for the kind of sort of elitist kind of perception. But at the end of the day, I got into this because I loved it. And I don't know about anybody here, I don't think I was a natural talent, I just felt like I had to work at it really hard. So I don't really sort of want to sort of keep shining all these kind of like halos, because to me it's just like you take somebody like we first started talking about, who's passionate and loves this and has a great work ethic. I'm sure as heck believe that we could turn them into an amazing, producer, engineer, or mixer. It's really about coming into it with the right attitude. And I think if anybody wants to take anything away from saying, it's that you can do it if you really apply yourself. And there are these great tools out there. But the number one thing is having that drive.
But can I add something to Warren that also ties up to a common mistake that I see a lot of young people do, or when they're starting to mix, is that they're watching all of these really fancy videos without really understanding that they don't have an SSL board in front of them. They don't even own half of the plugins, but they don't even know half of the outboard gear. They don't even own the right acoustically designed place to do what the people in front of them are doing. And worst of all, unfortunately, they don't have the access to that quality material that these fancy other companies are portraying.
Yep.
So then at the end of the day, it's like you try to replicate that at home and it's impossible to replicate. It's impossible because you're never going to get there, because you're not sitting, you don't have those $100,000 worth of equipment right in front of you, and you didn't have YouTube performing for you.
So I still wanted you to drop some names, but I want to continue on this because you bring up the fact that there's a setup on the video and they have access to a high quality studio environment and equipment, but they're at home in their bedroom.
Yeah, and exactly.
So is this still? Does that mean that there's still a relevant place to go with formal education? Should I go to university?
Of course.
Totally.
Of course. It's totally worth it. And I believe at any stage of your career, and I myself personally, I go to Pure Mix, I go to Mix with the Masters, I obviously go to Produce Like a Pro, I go to all of these places. And when I am not mixing, as instead of watching a movie, sometimes I am watching a tutorial, and I am watching my favorite engineers, my favorite producer talk about the nerdiest stuff possible, because it's still food for my brain. And I deeply encourage everyone to do so.
So when we prepared this get together, Warren, we wanted to talk about the formal settings, the social settings of being at a university or at a formal education. Can we bring this for everybody, because I think that was important to know. Yeah,
I know, I agree, because when we were preparing this, you asked me directly about you're an online educator, you do believe in formal education, and I was like, absolutely, because I think the question, everybody watching this, the question you have to ask yourself, if you're at a place where you're at a watershed moment, you're like, should I go back to school? Or maybe you're at a point where you're choosing whether to go to university and study, or should I go and get a job? Should I start producing on my own? All of these things, you just have to ask yourself, what's the learning environment that best suits you? We had a kid, I'm blanking on his name, Eryck, the young guy. He was great. It was really good. And we offered him a job, and he came back the next day and said he had called his parents back on the East Coast and said, I got offered a full-time job. And they said, well, if you want, your uncle or whatever is teaching over at some really great university, and they have a 3-year degree course in music production, and we can get you in there on a special deal. And he came back and he's like, I'm thinking about doing it. And I said to him, it's an interesting place, because I was offering him a job which would be the same job he would get 3 years later. That's what's interesting. He would come to me, and he wouldn't get a higher level job with a 3 years degree, because I still wanted that particular position filled. However, he was a guy that was really into the idea of schooling. He flourished on it. So for him, take away me and what my needs were, for him, he would have come out stronger, better educated. He enjoyed learning. He was a very social person, not in a negative way. He wasn't out drinking every night. I mean, he's just a social guy. He got on really well with everybody, and you could just tell that that was the thing. And so I said, you know what, go and do that, and come back in 3 years or wherever you might end up. So it's all about the individual. And a lot of people like isolating. A lot of my friends that are coders, programmers, they're sitting in bedrooms going making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, not spending. I don't know what they do with their money. You know what I mean? It's just like, so there are plenty of people that can make a living sitting in their bedrooms, but college is a whole different experience. And I'll just be honest, I want to get to a point in my life where, as I start getting older in this, I want to go back and do a degree in music, because I can read and write music and I understand all the theory and stuff, but there's still just a part of me that just wants to have a degree in music for something that I do and love. I'd love to go back and study the history of it more, because I grew up on classical. I don't think there's enough time in the world for what I want to do. I'd love to get on a plane and go to Austria for
into history, and I really wanted it. And it was my path.
Yeah. Thanks for so there's still and there's the social environment that's also important. People might need that as well, the social settings and interacting with other people.
Yeah, networking with people, creating relationships that will last a lifetime.
So let's talk about that, because actually, do you think you can create relationships online or at distance or through online education? Or
I have a handful of people that are on our team that I've never met.
Okay, so it's possible.
Yeah,
totally.
I've got mentors. Obviously, Marie and I have met several times at shows, but there's other mentors recently. Justin Cortalou is in Nashville, did a really good course with us, with a wonderful country artist. This is as close as we've got via Zoom, and we filmed a whole course together and all of that good stuff. There's quite a few mentors. I mean, some of that's obviously to do with current circumstances, because Nashville isn't that far away from us, but Christian Kohler, I'm working with him. He's a great German metal producer. We're building a whole business together, and we'll probably meet each other eventually, but we talk every day or every other day. Jamie Humphreys, who was Lick Library, the main guitar instructor there. I'm building a guitar academy with him. He lives in Sweden with his wife and baby.
Amazing.
Yeah, so, you can do business and network with people with never meeting them.
And it opens new opportunities. This is fascinating. Yeah. Eryck,
yes.
I have a question for you, and actually for everybody, but you're going to start if you don't mind, because you touched base a bit earlier, about the theory and the environment. We often hear people talking about critical listening skills, but what critical analytical skills? When someone promises to teach you everything in 3 months, or promising the ultimate course of mixing, how can you be sure you will get some real value out of it? That's something that's needed in real life. There's so many YouTubers. Oh, go ahead, and I'll follow.
So we're talking about the analytical
yes,
critical listening. Well, I think analytical thinking, critical listening, and I would also throw in the creative thinking. Okay. They all go in tandem. I don't think you could do one without. Obviously for critical listening, you need to learn how specific frequency, how to cut off certain frequency and where that frequency resides, how a compressor reacts to certain things. I mean, those are important. And also being analytical is like stepping back and listening to it as a whole to see if the vibe is right, the feel is right, if you're actually achieving the direction of the song. And obviously the creative thinking, where you could just add your own ideas and how to manipulate certain effects. I think all those three is important, not just one. Having those three is vital when it comes to mixing.
Anyone else wants to add anything?
Warren?
You know me. As the only thing I know about is music. So, to ask me about other things, I'll be like, huh? Cricket? You want to talk about cricket? Yeah, exactly.
That's another topic.
Yeah, that's a whole other. Yeah, but no, honestly, it's the only thing I really know anything about.
I think I want Ryan. Actually, I want you if you can follow up on something very specific, and Maria, you as well, because you said for 7 years you study, and I think that's the aspect of the analytical skills, but also the fact that in 3 months can I get all the skills that I need to mix a record or work in a studio? And the answer is,
if it's one-on-one, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think so.
If it's one-on-one and it was me with Maria for 3 months, we were working on something, absolutely. But how are you going to get that one-on-one experience with somebody, working with them like that?
And Maria said no. So I love this because I'm
making it.
Yeah.
I suppose what I'm doing is I'm making an assumption, Maria, that somebody is coming in with skills and they need honing and they need, I'm not a complete beginner. No way. No, not a complete beginner. But if you're a hobbyist, you're making records and you just want to take it to the next level, sure. Come up with $200,000 and send a check to Maria and say, I want you to own me for 3 months, and she'll take you to a studio and teach you one-on-one. Absolutely. But the reality is the problem with the sort of 3-month course idea is that I was trying to make a point really that unless it's one-on-one, it's not going to happen. And it can't be one-on-one. You can't pay somebody enough to do it. I mean, what would it be? $150 an hour? Somebody would charge for that kind of experience. You'd have to be a very wealthy person to get that. Yeah, there's definitely a lot you can learn in 3 months. But if you're taking like a mid-level kind of home production person and want to turn them into somebody really quite incredible, no, it's just not possible.
I'll touch upon that because I was in school for a semester, and being in learning it within that semester, I didn't really absorb anything because there's so many people in class. You'll be sitting in a different spot of the room and hearing something different from the guy sitting right next to the board. So it's a different experience. Like Warren said, I think one-on-one, it might be doable for 3 months for somebody that has already experience. But for us, a beginner, no. And yeah, I think 3 months might not be enough for a whole class to literally learn.
Plus, I think Maria can speak to this better than me, but who here knows what the heck they're doing anyway? You know what I mean? It's like I'm still learning. So I think I think if you could hire Maria for 3 months one-on-one, you'd really quadruple your skill set. But at the end of the day, you're still going to walk out. You're still learning. There's still new things happening. Yeah.
And from my personal experience, I actually got hired by a really wealthy person who had a PhD in biomechanics. And this person had developed this patent, and he's set forever. And he hired me, and I would go to his place 3 times a week or so, and I gave him lessons for 2 or 3 hours and had to record, and the guy could grab any recording book that I gave him and dig it like that, because you're talking about a PhD on biomechanical engineering. I mean, coming up with mathematical concepts or acoustical concepts is fast enough, but in those 3 months, how are you going to develop taste? The person has never been in a band, has never performed. He's just learning guitar. So how are you going to grow into music in 3 months, even if you're the smartest person? It's really difficult.
That's really, wow, we could talk about that. I could ask you a bunch of questions because I love that, because there's also understanding how to make something sound current. What I mean by that is everybody, everybody wants something that sounds classic and classy and timeless. But if you recorded something to sound exactly like it did in 1965, most people would say it sounds old-fashioned. Exactly. So you've got to understand, like, how do you get both? I mean, that's where the beauty of somebody like Adele works so well. She makes you think of Motown and soul and all this classic music, and it sounds so much like that. But if you A/B it with a record of the time, it's got extended high end and low end and depth and width and all of this stuff, and it's a modern sounding record, but the incredible producers and engineers and songwriters and performers and mixers involved there and mastering engineers have managed to convince you that you're listening to a mid-60s, stack soul Atlantic Motown track. But it's not. It's completely modern. And that is something that takes a lot more than just going boost 5K, cut 2 VB here, boost that, turn the volume up. That's what Maria's talking about there. That's the taste. That's taking some technical skills and then,
And
that's a lot of acquired. Yeah.
Ear training not only for frequency, but for music and also for taste, for critical listening and all of that. It takes more than 5 years. Because it is what it is. It's retraining your brain to understand different levels of understandings.
So, Maria, and we don't have 5 years, but what are the 5? What would be? How do you do this ear training for 5 years? What would be a good practice?
Well, there's definitely, and nowadays, I remember in my day, we would need to sit down in a classroom, or if you were in a student environment working with someone, then because you're tweaking EQs every day and you're having a client going, nope, 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 yes. Or a producer going, that's not right, yes, that's right. There goes your ear training. So that is the studio format, right? You're going at it every day until one day you're like, do you like it? Yes, I do. And then there's the other way, which is how I did it. We had audio engineering classes where you would go and you would hear frequencies and you'd be like, I think that's 250. I think that's 380. I think that's here and there. And then you would just memorize them and go study them at home. And nowadays there are softwares. There are apps for your phone. There's Golden Ears. There's a bunch of those that I can remember, those apps. And
Sound Gym.
There you go. And then
I like that one.
You download them and you train and you practice every single day. Mm-hmm. And then also you learn how to play an instrument and you learn in your brain. You got to make that for an engineer and producer, you got to make that connection. If I have what is a A4 and what is 440 hertz? How do I sound? How do I make 440 hertz sound? Like, can I do that? What is my voice doing that? And then your brain needs to connect all of those pieces of information. And it's a practice that takes every single day. You go at it until one day it clicks.
Is this like for notes, like having perfect pitch?
You can have perfect pitch. And I know people that have developed perfect and it works really well. And I also know people that I have relative pitch. So that works really well because I just go at it right away. And I'm ballparking it. I'm not going straight to the note, but I'm ballparking it. When I'm EQing, that's more than enough.
Yeah. Relative pitch is actually maybe what you can learn after if you're not born with it.
That's absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I know people that have actually trained themselves to have perfect pitch. Is really freaky.
It's incredible.
After 20 years or so.
Yeah. Well, I have a follow-up question actually. So by now, you all noticed that we're wearing PJs provided to us by Sonarworks, and really, I think it's the spirit of how Sonarworks create those tools for. Yes, I like it. This is my
the Fonz PJs.
The Fonz.
There you go.
I was about to say the Eryck Cantona one.
That's good.
When I don't talk about,
but I'm not a Man United fan, so you can't say that.
Sorry about
that. You
that.
have to edit that out.
I'm a Manchester United fan.
We'll cut it out. We'll cut it out. But yeah, so we're wearing PJs. It's of course to represent the fact that a lot of people produce at home in their bedroom. I think everybody got the analogy, but Maria, the question I wanted to ask you. You work in a treated room and you all work in treated room, but what ideas would you give our audience to improve their listening environment?
Oh, acoustical treatment 101, whatever you can afford, start small. A lot of people, when I get this question asked all the time, And it's like when I tell people you need to start getting acoustic treatment, they're like, oh my God, but I can afford that. And it's like, hold on. No, it's your bedroom. Nobody's telling you to tear it all up and start from scratch. It's not like that. You don't have to rebuild your walls. But you purchase a couple of panels, then you purchase a couple of bass traps, then you purchase something for your ceiling, and then you keep doing that. Every time you have $50, $100, you keep investing and you keep treating your room. Also, that is really important, something to set your speakers on. So good set of stands. And if you're doing it on top of you have them on your desk, make sure you're decoupling them from or like elevating them or supporting them on something that is going to just make have a physical barrier between your speakers and your desk, so your desk is not resonating, and then make sure that whatever it's holding, that like it's able to do a little bit of decoupling, right? Just so that those frequencies don't travel through the surfaces. What else? Obviously, I recommend Sonarworks for people that cannot afford professional acoustic treatment and calibration for the speakers. But then again, just be sure that you're using it wisely so you understand your room and you have both the acoustical treatment and Sonarworks match perfectly together, because you are still working on your room, same time you're adding up the minor tweaking with Sonarworks. So that works amazingly well. Get a carpet, get some foam, put some curtains or shades so you're not going to have bounce off reflection points, all of that. Study.
And study. We talk about in the past, actually for preparing, you favor tools to flatten the reference, I believe, but there's also tools out there that replicate spaces. Any thoughts on this?
I like those. I haven't. I've used the Waves Abbey Road 3, and actually I went to Abbey Road when they released it, and I sat in the room with a pair of Sony, generic 7506s, and listened to the music on the laptop through the app, with my eyes closed, took the headphones off, played the music through the speakers, and I'm telling you, it sounded exactly like being in the room. I mean, it's the Abbey Road boffins with the Waves guys, and I know it took them 2 years to model it, and they did a really, really good job. I've tried the VSX, the Slate one. I haven't got it yet. They sold out immediately, but I did try it because my friend Matt Lang, I'm sure you guys know Matt, he has it, and they've done something very smart. I was talking to Slate today about it. What they've done is they've limited the amount of scope of the ambience of the room, because one of the one of the realities is with this modeling, even when it's amazingly well done, which Waves have done, is it's still like learning another room.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah. So if you bring in too much of the room, it actually makes it more confusing. What Stephen did very, very smartly, and it's kind of one of those things he does with all of his plugins, is he realized that quickly. So he just limits the amount of actual room ambience you can bring in. So every room sounds different, but not so dramatically different that people are freaking out, because I couldn't understand initially what the problem that people were having. And then I realized, they're essentially going into a completely different acoustically treated room, like Abbey Road Studio 3, which sounds phenomenal, but it's so different to their listening environment, and most importantly, so different to their headphones. Mm-hmm. So what he's done is he's basically gone and made it so it's like, just added a slight bit of room to it. Oh, this room sounds like this. This room sounds like that. As opposed to what the Abbey Road one, which is fantastic, but it was like, whoa, it was like, oh my God, I'm in this amazing control room. Yeah, amazing, but nothing like headphones. So really difficult for people. So I think that was a smart thing. And then also, my disc is out of space because you want us to send this video stuff? Or are you going to record it and edit it from here? We're filming separately as well. Do you want that, or are you going to edit it from here, Loic?
No, I don't need anything.
Oh, okay, cool. That's fine.
I was going to say I wasn't even recording. I'm supposed
Who's recording?
Sorry. then you're going to have to edit this bit out. You were doing so well, and I just ruined it.
So everybody knows now that we're pre-recorded, but we won't tell you the date. But it's soon to be March.
You'll find a point to edit it.
Nice edit point. And then I have my own experience of it, because there's an Indian company, a wonderful bunch of guys called Embody, and they actually came to my studio and rang it out. So if you buy their version of it, you got my studio. And I actually, this is before the Slate one came out, I did the same thing. I told them I want 40% room. I said, if you give them 100% of my room, it sounds great, particularly with the big focals, which are just so massive, they just fill up the room. But I said, in general, if you've got like the little monitors in the middle, no matter what you do, if you dial in too much room, people are just going to be like, huh? Because they're going from this to suddenly being thrown into a room they don't know. So that's a very long synopsis, a long answer, but I really think that's the defining thing. It's a good piece of technology for giving you alternative environments, but it has to be controlled. Otherwise, all it does is confuse.
I think Plugin Alliance came up with the Dear VR monitor, where you could actually tune down the room ambience and ramp it up.
Yeah, they all have that, but unfortunately, when it has the 100%, you know what I mean? If the 100% is what Slate's done, and what other people are realizing now is just make the 100% 40.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm not a big fan of that. I just think it just adds more confusion. If you really want to become a really great engineer, just build your room. Don't get any shortcuts.
It's also about familiarity. If you're familiar with your own setup, your own room, you go somewhere else, it's totally different listening environment. You hear something different. I mix in different studios a lot, and every studio has a different sound, but I'm more familiar with my room, and I'm more comfortable mixing in there because I know exactly what I'm getting, what I'm actually hearing. I mean, yeah, the rooms are treated in those studios, but I'm not familiar with the sound of it. So it's just an adjustment, I guess.
It might be connected to the next question I wanted to ask all of you. But Warren, to continue on the fact that as you were giving the example of being in the Abbey Road studio and then putting, being like, well, it sounds like the room. Is there still room? I mean, we recently the mastering department at the famed Capitol Studios in Hollywood kind of shut down. Everybody left. So this is a room that's closing. Is there still room for room? Is there still room for traditional recording studios? What do you think will happen to those big spaces, those big control rooms?
I mean, I think it's natural selection, and I don't mean natural selection like some of the best studios have. Some of the best studios have closed. So I don't mean natural selection, i.e., the good ones are left and the bad ones are gone. That's not my point at all. I just mean, I think the density of the amount of studios is going to change. There's still going to be plenty of people that are going to want to get together in a room and record together. It's never going to go away. It might be mainly jazz, it might be classic rock, it might be folk, it might be classical, or it might be modern bands harking back, like we were talking about Adele earlier. It might be that kind of thing where they want to reproduce an orchestra with a band on a good live room. It's what I mean by natural selection is just popular music that most people consume isn't made like that anymore. Yeah. It's not that, that's not true. There is music being played, just the percentage has shifted. So where maybe, when I was in England in the late 80s and early 90s, where I first started getting into music, there was a massive melting pot of Massive Attack and Portishead and all these bands that were sort of blending samples with recorded stuff. Well, now we've moved entirely into just the one side of it, predominantly, not entirely. So there always will be a place, because I certainly don't talk in absolutes. But when I mean natural selection, I just think, unfortunately, it's very hard for, every city to have 100 big rooms. And like I said, it's unfortunately not that the best ones are left and the worst one. There's been some ones that have gone under that are just mind blowing how good they were, and they've gone forever. And then there's other factors as well. People get older, they want to retire, they close down studios, they sell it to property developers, middle of big cities. Yeah. But my short answer is yes, there'll always be a place for it. It's just there's less of them.
Do you see actually studios getting built up?
getting built. Oh yeah, I think there's more studios being built than ever. Because now what's happening is you've got us three, and we all want to build rooms.
Let's go.
That's it. Yeah, there's more studios. There's actually more studios. There's just less commercial studios, but there's more good studios because now you've got like each one of us has probably got, you know, tens of thousands of dollars worth of gear. You know, we've got great gear, and so no, there's more. And now, do we all have amazing drum rooms? No, I mean, I've got a really good studio. I've got an SSL, but my drum room's just like a size of a little bedroom. You know, it's not a massive room. If I want to get the massive room, I rent out the studio. Yeah. But in general, I've got a room where I can do everything except for live drums. You know.
And then there's the other thing. Well, like if you really want to get a really good drum, like a really good drum room, then you call your drummer, and that drummer has a really cool studio that he built himself, where he can just deliver you the tracks like that. Same with the guitar player, same with the bass player, the trumpet player. Now they all have their own studios, and the instrumentalists and performers nowadays have the capabilities of recording themselves easily with an iPad. It's just like they're connected to Logic or Ableton or whatever, and it's just more studios for everyone.
Tommy Vicari did a film score entirely with orchestral elements recorded at individual home studios. Wow. And what he worked out is he had his assistant put together a mobile rig, and they would deliver it to people, and they would do like a little conference call and describe how to do it. And you had like this 75-year-old world-class, you know, viola player, you know, and they're going, move the mic over here and just do that. And they're putting down this part. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way.
It's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Eryck?
I'll have to check on that.
Yeah.
I think that's very intriguing.
I actually, last week I did a live jam using Listento. And the person, I was in San Francisco and the person was in Utah. And one would experience a delay, but it was minimum, but the other one, it was perfect. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So
I've done sessions where, especially during the pandemic, where everything's remote. They would just be recording their living room. It's really doable.
And I think it's like every other industries, you know, it's becoming, because it had to become the norm, it's becoming very acceptable to do those remote sessions now. You know,
absolutely.
And it's incredible because you can open up now. Suddenly you can have the 75-year-old cello player play on your record wherever they are.
That's amazing.
Amazing. So we're going to switch gear a bit because here we are. People are going to watch us on YouTube, and YouTube is 15, 16 years old. I think it's from 2006. But there's a lot of noise in our industry right now among our peers about new platforms. And Eryck, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on new trends and platforms that have been adopted by audio engineers, such as TikTok, but also Clubhouse. And as we were talking about education, you know, Clubhouse and networking and, you know, connecting with other peers, you know, love your thoughts on this. And if you
I think each platform is, I mean, these are great tools to have nowadays. We like Maria pointed out earlier, when I started, we didn't have these before. You know, I open books and try to find out what 3K is, you know. But yes, these are great platform. I mean, honestly, I don't have TikTok. I actually try to prevent my daughter being in TikTok. But artists have flourished in TikTok. It's a great tool to have. They have flourished. Especially being an artist. Any platform you could get into and do well, why not? Clubhouse, I am not too familiar with it, to be honest, but I've had colleagues where you know, they said, oh, it's like a virtual classroom where you could learn things, you know, either one-on-one or with a bunch of people. But honestly, I haven't actually got to check that out yet.
Is it another place we're going to have reliable and or unreliable information?
Nah, there's everything. I've actually been listening on Clubhouse for like about 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so, and I've jumped in the weirdest conversations ever. It's like
there you go.
I jumped into a conversation where some lawyers were telling an artist that it was okay for them to give the their manager a cut of their publishing. And I'm like, no,
Wow.
don't do that. And they were like, it's fine, the lawyers. And I'm like, no. So
Wow.
there's a little bit of everything. But then
and
again,
probably Maria, it's let me ask you this: it's probably like all of these platforms in its infancy, it's going to be good, but you know the reality is in 2 years' time, because they're not building a business model to only have like the cool 100,000 artists in there like it's got at the moment. They want to be Facebook, so they're going to start off like, yeah, this is like the man, you know, this is like a community, you know, blah, blah, blah. Invite only, make it super cool. But that's Facebook started. Remember, it was only students.
But I'm very surprised. As an example, Clubhouse, I joined recently, and I won't say why, but all my social networks, all the people I know, most of the people in audio and music were on Clubhouse. I was very surprised.
Because it has caught up. And then you know what? It's like there's everything. Like I was just getting a notification from Clubhouse, like this and this and this people. Like for example, this at lunch, Piper Payne, Luca Predolesi, and a bunch of other mastering engineers were having a conversation, and I'm like, but it was like I was already dealing with work and I was running a session stuff. And I'm like, I can't stop and hear, but I'm missing out on this. This is incredible. Like I want to listen to Luca and Piper and all of these really cool people talking about mastering. So it comes a point where like when you join right about the time, you're going to find amazing conversations or just people like chilling and telling stories. Like I've tuned in, for example, Gary Noble, he joins in all the time. And when when he starts talking about like his experiences recording Fugees or Amy Winehouse, you're like this, you're like, talk to me more because I love this experience. So as everything, I think it's great, but I do foresee not so interesting territory in the future being that anybody can join Access. Will join, and eventually how do you curate that content? It's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, and to Warren's point, you know, once the flood opens up and it becomes, you know, there will be a lot of noise and it's going to be a new challenge for Clubhouse, and it will have to figure out how to better moderate and so on. We have a few more questions, but we I think past the hour, so I really wanted to wrap things up with a couple of, you know, quick sound bites from all of you, but I wanted to ask you, you know, you all continue to learn. I mean, Warren, you said that earlier, you know, even though you have certain place, you're in a certain place in your career, but you're still learning. But who's your favorite educator? Is there any recommended book that about audio that you would love to mention? Anything, you know?
I like artist and producer books that are more about the psychology than I do the technical stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the best book I've ever written on making music, the best two, are Phil Ramone's Making Records, because he just talks about the psychology of working with artists. And it really helps you if you've worked with artists, because you're like, oh, now I get what was going on. There's like these massive revelations when you read it. And then, of course, prepares you for things you may not have thought of. And it's just a beautiful read. And then I really like artist biographies, because then you get to understand the people you're recording. The Miles Davis one that Paul Tingham wrote called Miles Beyond is absolutely amazing. And then the one that Miles did himself, which I'm blanking on the name, he wrote it with Quincy Troop. It might have just been called Miles Davis for those people watching, but it's Miles Davis, Quincy Troop is,
I think so.
It's just amazing. So you don't have to be a Miles Davis fan. I am, but you don't have to be. It's a way to see into the mind of an artist. So as a producer's perspective, otherwise, you know, there are a lot of really good recording books, but I wouldn't necessarily, not one is jumping out at me at the moment. And I feel like in your development, you can't get enough of an understanding about how to work with people. Let's just keep growing that, you know.
Yeah. What about you, Eryck or Mario? Any?
Well, I always keep this book that is right here. This is the Bible. Every single terminology, every single concept, every single piece of gear that exists in the world, that book's got it. Also, I recommend the recording engineer book written by Dave Miles Hubbard is the best book, and it was the first one, and it has been re-edited so many times, and the way Dave talks about things is just beautiful, and I recommend it to all of my students and every single person that wants to understand our world, because the way he approaches all the concepts is just in a very basic and simple, but yet global, and sort of like time, like everything. It's like he wrote it in the 80s and it's still valid, and then he keeps re-editing it, because that is one thing with audio engineering books. If they don't get re-edited, then you're going to open it's like really old Pro Tools from early 2000s. His books keeps being re-edited, so you'll always find really interesting technologies in there, and I think those two are my two to go. Me personally, for fun, I read biographies about Beethoven, Mozart. I that's what I like to read. I read biographies, what was going on through Beethoven's mind when he was writing all of his symphonies. That's what I read for food for brain.
I have the same book with Maria, but I mostly read magazines more than books, especially like Sound on Sound magazines. I kind of like go to how the record was done, or how it was mixed, and what plugin was this engineer using to achieve those vocals. So
tape up. Yeah.
So I'm more intrigued in those, like, getting those details in a magazine. Book wise, same sound and recording book. I just bought that like 4 weeks ago, just to get just to get like I said, we're learning as we go. So any type of information always is like
absolutely.
So I would like to make two plugs personally, because we talk about books and biography, and if you have read it or not. But Quincy Jones' biography called Q I read it long time ago, and it's just incredible. To what you were saying, Warren, about dealing with artists, and he dealt with some big ones. But I want to do a plug, and my plug for you, Warren. You have this program where you dissect one song that changed the world of music, which also is fascinating to watch, and I really truly enjoy that as well.
Oh, thank you.
I
love doing those, because they're one of the things I love doing about what we do is, like, I get to I think how we all inhabit this world. We started off talking about it with one of the problems with YouTube. It's great, it's incredible, it's got amazing information, but it is a popularity site. And when I do those, sometimes it hits a nerve, because it's a song that I know 1 million people are going to go and love, But then I get to do, like I just did Jerry Rafferty. Yeah. The production on that song is unbelievable. The musicianship is unbelievable. And then I did Kate Bush, Wuthering Heights. Musicianship, unbelievable. She wrote it as a teenager. She's 18 years old. She's coming in here just telling us what to do. She was there. She wrote Man with a Child in His Eyes when she was 15. I think she wrote it when she was 13 and recorded it when she was 15.
Great.
And the engineer on that was Jeff Eryck, So I just love it, because we get to talk about these things that, you know what I mean? It's like we get to talk about these things that it's a balance between what people want to know and what they should know. There's not always what they want. I'll give them what they want if it happens to be what I humbly think they need.
Thank you for sharing a bit the behind the scene, or how you approach this.
Thank you, Loic. You're a very generous man.
No, and you. I mean, what I love about you, clearly admire the artist and the artistry behind it and the people behind it, and this come to life. I mean, you're clearly a big fan of. One episode, it was the Sting one, or the Police one, where you were talking about Sting, how it was an incredible lyricist, and I never thought about it, but I'm like, oh my God, yeah, crazy. All right, last question.
Well, he was an English teacher. He was a 26-year-old English teacher teaching kids English and playing jazz on the weekends. And he was called Sting because he wore a yellow and black striped sweater. That was his nickname, was Sting, because they say he looked like a bee, bumblebee.
Wow.
Wow.
There you go.
All right,
Well,
my
no,
last. Yeah.
Karen. No. I just say I like knowing that something we can all identify and go with. Oh, I'm that person, as opposed to sort of. I think that's my sort of mission. I think I say this a lot, but it's one of the best things that happened to me is I grew up really poor in a very wealthy area. So I got the nice wealthy accent, but I grew up dirt poor. So it's given me a little bit of a chip on my shoulders, to say the least, where I kind of like to push against some of this kind of elitist kind of attitudes. I like to get to the heart and soul of like, this person is like us. The only differentiator is they just got up and worked their arse off to get where they were. And that we can all
incredible talent and an incredible talent.
Right, but they worked hard for it.
Yeah.
And so it gives us all hope that we could be that if we work hard for it.
Amen.
So there is one more question I want to ask as a closing statement, and really try to inspire people to take what they learned with us. Take that last advice is about mentorship. Do you have mentors? Have you had mentors? Should people
ask me last?
Should we embrace this as a thing in the industry?
Absolutely.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
I've had mentors, and I am a mentor. So I highly encourage that, because I think there's only so much that we can learn through books, through YouTube, through going to college and whatnot. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty or the daily things about our careers, there comes that moment where you want to just ask the person, how the hell did you do that?
Mm.
Or how do you manage this situation? Or like, I'm going with this thing with a client, which is something that I've found that Clubhouse, actually, for example, has become a little bit of a mentorship space for up and coming artists and up and coming engineers and producers. And then there's like this little group of, 5 to 10 more veteran mixers or producers or whatever. And then people just jump in and he'll like, hey man, I've got this client and I already delivered them the files, but they don't want to pay me. What do I do? So it's like we always, because that is not written, you can find all the techie stuff on the books, but you will never find the daily things of our job. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's really important and really invigorating to take mentors and then, to take somebody to mentees and then just pass on, because none of us would be here if somebody hadn't taken times or confusion or just random questions. So I think as a matter of honoring those people that helped us, then we can pass the baton and help someone else, and then it can move forward. So because we came out well, and then whoever taught us did well, and that is something that is like honoring that beautiful tradition of just that just being a good person and being a role model in the industry, I think.
Yeah. Good words. So how do we find a mentor?
Well, I'm going to say something. There was one time where I was like starting out. I forgot his last name, Ian, from the UK mastering engineer. He was the one of the first who started with a blog, and he came out with the dynamic range day and all of these things. And I remember I loved how he talked about music and mixing and mastering and whatnot. And one day I went like, I'm just going to write to him. And he wrote back. So start reaching out with people with social media. It's just really simple to reach out to people. I go through people that go through produce like a pro videos, and they just ask questions to Warren, and then sometimes Warren gets back to them.
That's true. All the time. Warren, how do you do this? It's incredible.
I actually answered a couple of questions while we were talking.
That's where you were
talking.
There you go. So make sure you drop questions below, because Warren's going to check it out.
I will check it out, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm working with in new environments and stuff. I'll always go and answer, because it's all about cultivating people and helping them, mentoring them. It's possible. I honestly, I don't see why people don't. I think that's a part of the.
It's intimidating, Warren.
No, I don't see why people who don't do who do YouTube videos don't interact with their audience. I see, the huge mega channels. They might answer one or two questions, especially if it's like, "Oh my God, you're amazing! You changed my life. Thanks, man." They'll do a little bit of that, but I try to get in there and help people, because it is called Produce Like a Pro. It's not called Warren's whatever, it's not my name. And the idea is for it to be community. And, what we're doing here is sharing our experience, strength and hope with each other and helping each other grow together. And I think it just comes from a place where I don't see. One of my biggest mentors, for instance, is Jack Douglas, and he doesn't have any highfalutin opinion of himself or his abilities whatsoever. And yet, he recorded, Toys in the Attic and Rocks and Double Fantasy. He was one of the engineers on Imagine. His resume's insane. He's recorded quite a few Beatles. I think he's recorded Paul, John, obviously multiple times, just did some Ringo stuff. His resume is insane, but if you were to sit him down, he's just like, well, just making it up as I go, has no ego whatsoever. So I learned more from being around him than I probably have from anybody else, because he makes everybody in the room feel important. He doesn't do favorites. And I've worked with producers when I was not only, but when I was the engineer on projects, and you watch the producers kind of hone in on the songwriter, the lead singer. And they were just like, hey, man, oh, yeah, I love what you're doing there. Because they knew that was the important person. And then and those guys that were usually dudes just didn't seem to have that greater career. And then you meet a guy like Jack, and he's just like, Tom, what do you think? And the bass player's drumming in, and the other guitar player, and the drummer, and everybody correcting them subtly, but he's getting great performances out of individual players rather than dictating, and so it's interesting because mentorship is like, going back to me when you asked about going back to the book choices, and Maria and Eryck was saying, about book choices. It's like, we're not always into the technical things, because we realize a lot of those can be learned through trial and error, but understanding how to relate to people, how to get performances out of them, that's I've learned more from mentors. And I would say that every mentor I've ever had, I sort